There does he look like? He's
At this point, we want to move quickly into it. I was hoping to see Michael Elliott here. I'm not seeing him. He was slated to give an opening prayer.
He is logging on soon, Mark, so you can look out for him, but maybe want to move on until he comes.
All right, so basically this ceremony is to commemorate the life of my father, Wentworth Bowen. And basically, because of COVID restrictions that we have prevailing now, it's not possible to gather as we would have wanted with the numbers that we would have wanted in a church ceremony. So the burial arrangements already took place, but in terms of a real tribute to him and a memorial, this is what it will be. We'll try and do the best we can online. You know, so we reached out to people who knew him in different phases of his life, different parts of his career path, to try and get a perspective of who was Wentworth Bowen. And the turnout has been amazing. Nearly everybody that we contacted, they were very happy to be a part of it, you know. It's really been very humbling to me personally. So once Michael Elliott logs in, we'll go into that opening prayer. Right now, looking in the room, I'm seeing people from as far away as Canada, My brother Colin is from Antigua, several people from Jamaica where he would have worked most of his life. He actually seemed to have thought of Jamaica as his home, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I was not sure when I went to bring him to Jamaica how he would receive me, because he seemed a bit reluctant before to come back to Jamaica, but to my pleasant surprise, he was more than ready to come back home, and he was actually excited to be back home, you know. He was born in Barbados, of course, but he spent most of his career in Jamaica. His family was raised in Jamaica, so Jamaica was his home, you know. Michael Elliott is with us now, I believe, but his video is not yet on. So Michael, once you're ready, please go ahead with the opening prayer. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Evening, everyone. Good to see you, Mark. Albeit under the circumstances. Let us pray. Gracious God, giver of all good things, giver of life, we thank you for the life of our brother, your son, Wenty. Thank you for his impact on our lives, on his family, friends, colleagues this evening, to remember him. And we thank you for lending him to us, family and friends, for a time. And we pray that our memories of him and the times we have shared, or times we have shared with the family, will live on in our hearts in good, positive ways. Pray that all that is said and done in this moment, in this time of gathering, will be of benefit for each one of us. And so we ask you to direct all that is said and done. May your name be honored, but also may the memory of Wenty and late wife Avril remain in our hearts as we seek to support Mark, Colin, and Wayne in the continuing journey on this earth of ours. Bless this time, bless all of us, all who are part of this gathering, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Michael. And although Michael is a minister of the Anglican Church, he was also a close neighbor to our family for many years. In fact, his family is like my second home when I was growing up. If my mom didn't see me at home, she knew I was over their house playing and hanging out. So really appreciate it, Michael. We'll move straight into the next presentation, which is by Peter Espeut. Peter Espeut is a well-known columnist in the Gleaner, but he also worked closely with my dad at ISER at UWI. And he's a staunch Roman Catholic. So good to see you, Peter Espeut.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy to be remembered by the family. Or not to be remembered by the family. It's so long ago now. I don't know how many decades, but yes. And I like to join my prayers along with Michael's. I'm being described as a staunch Roman Catholic. Of course, I am a clergyman myself, and would have been happy to lead the prayer, but happy Michael was able to. I'm sure Wenty had his private office at ISA, but he spent almost all of his time in the computer lab, such as it was then. This was the days before PCs. People didn't have private computers, so I was a systems manager for the ISA computer, which was a small system. It was a kind of avant-garde small system called a Southwest Tech. And you had to use it, you had to come into the computer lab, which I managed. And Wenty, I can't recall him actually going anywhere else. And the result was that we chatted for hours and hours and hours, which is probably why you guys remember the association between Wenty and I. Wenty, of course, was very soft-spoken and yet so ready to talk and to share. I thought I got to know him quite well. I, of course, eventually became a columnist for the Greene, but Wenty was a journalist long before me. And we would talk and talk about writing and about how to do it and so on. Looking back, I could probably say that Wenty was my mentor as far as that was concerned. I've now been writing for the Gleaner for 30 years. I'm the longest serving columnist, I think, in any newspaper in Jamaica. And Wenty has a part to play in that because he coached me a lot, I would say. I did a lot of other writing other than columns. And he would read what I would write and he would let me read what he wrote. And it is a great pleasure to share space with him and to share thoughts. Everyone will remember the very difficult time when Wenty was asked to collaborate with Derek Gordon, and there was a third person whose name I don't remember, in that 1980, I think it was 1980, opinion poll business, where their little group predicted a landslide victory for the PNP. Of course, it was the exact opposite, a landslide victory for the JLP. But Carl Stone came down very heavily on the three of them and Wenty took it very hard. He said, you know, I trusted them. That was not my role to do X, Y, and Z. I did so and so. I think he was very hurt. And then shortly after that, he left Jamaica. I never saw him after that, never to ask him whether that whole incident was what precipitated his departure from Jamaica. But I don't think he, in the end, suffered much from it. I guess it was more his pride was hurt. But I have missed him over the years. I wish I had him sometimes when I'm writing to pass something by him. And I have some photos of him myself. I was looking for them to share in my screen this evening. But my archiving apparently is not as effective as I thought. I can't find any of them, not even one. But Wenty also walked around with his camera. I'm sure he has hundreds of pictures that I would be in, and of our time at ISA and so on. I'd love if someone could find those pictures and share some of them with me to bring back the memories of those days. So I see so many others here. I see that there are 42 other people logged in to this session. And so out of respect to everyone else, I'll just say thank you to the family for asking me to say something and for accommodating me first, because I do have something else. I'll stay for a while and then go. Thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless Wenty, wherever you are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Espeut. You're right, that poll that he did, he went up against the legendary Carl Stone, in a sense. He spoke to me about it, and as you said, he was deeply hurt by the results. He said to me that his role in the project was really to design the questions, but it seems as if the way the questionnaires were administered was not exactly well done. So he definitely suffered a blow to his reputation because of that. But he really felt hurt by it, you know, and kind of betrayed in a sense. But being the man he is, he didn't go publicly and say anything about it. He just took the hurt and the hit and just kind of suffered it. And strangely enough, what was also interesting with that, from my memories of it, that is that Carl Stone was very good-natured to us. I remember Carl Stone being one of the most, out of all the lecturers that I used to know from SCR, Carl Stone was quite pleasant to me always. So there was no bitter feeling between my dad and Carl Stone, even though there was this public rivalry. There was a lot of
it was a professional thing. Carl had predicted the opposite.
Right.
And Wenty and his cohort had predicted, and Carl left no stone unturned, pardon the pun, to lash Wenty and his cohort for getting the wrong answer. I think Carl loved that. So he would have been...
He was a very competitive guy professionally. But I'm saying to you that what was interesting to me, despite the professional rivalry, on a personal level, they were quite amicable and actually seemed to be good friends. You know, there was a lot of mutual respect there. However, without further ado, my next presenter needs no introduction at all. She could be considered the voice of Jamaica. She has been known to host and MC nearly every national event that I can think of from I was a little child. So without further ado, Miss Fae Ellington.
Thank you so much, Mark, for allowing me to say a few words on behalf of this really outstanding man. Let me just say, I had indicated that I had to run, but I've made some adjustments, so I'll be able to stay for a while longer to hear some of the other tributes. But let me ask everybody gathered here, who keeps an assignment for 35 years? Who? And why would you keep an assignment for 35 years? Well, I kept that assignment because Wenty Bowen taught me sociology, but he taught me much more than sociology at the University of the West Indies at the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communication, as it was then called. It's now the Caribbean School of Media and Communication. But that assignment did a lot for me personally and professionally. You know, sometimes you see people in the public eye and you believe that they're big and bad and they're confident, and then no. I was very, very lacking in confidence. Yes, I think my training in theater allowed me to cover some of this, find coping mechanisms. But there was this assignment that I decided I would write, and I told her, should I not? And he said, go ahead. And it had to do with aspects of my life. So he gave me the strength and the courage to put it down in black and white. So he helps me professionally and personally. You know, you have to deal with issues as you go along. What I found about Mr. Bowen, and he would say, call me Wenty, he was just so mild-mannered and warm and helpful, and he just wanted the best for all of us students. And not just students, but if you worked with them at the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, I interacted but didn't work. But people like Ken Nelson and Keith Campbell, those people worked with Wenty Bowen. He was into making documentaries, yes. And these were cultural and historical documentaries. It meant a lot to him to put those things down for the records. So here he was doing all of these things. And perhaps you have somebody from CPTC who speaks to his involvement there, because he taught script writing there as well. But if I bumped into Mr. Bowen in the lobby at Carrimac, in his soft voice, sometimes you had to say, pardon, sir. He would speak with you warmly, wish you a very good day, ask you how things were going, and he would just look at you knowingly, because I was writing about an aspect of my life, I had to open up that aspect of my life to him. And I think he would say to himself, oh, look at that. Oh, this lady never thought that she could have done this. Eh? So he encouraged me, made me feel as if I could share those things. I could write, and you know, and that I could express myself in a very special way. So this quiet, calm person, really, I have the assignment. But Mark, I have been battling a little asthma attack, you see, and you know, dust or asthma don't work. So today when I started dig, I said, no, Faye, leave it. Me keep the assignment because his comments on it, right? And of course, that must be now like ashes, because, you know, those days it wasn't the computer. So it is now. So I'm going to have to find it, though. But it meant so much to me that I have kept it for 35 years. I want to thank you, and I want to just say to you, you and your brothers and your families, that your father and father-in-law and granddad made an extraordinary contribution to the documenting of life in Jamaica. And not just in Jamaica, I was being reminded by Ken Nelson today that he had gone across to Cuba to do a documentary as well. And you know, in the 70s, yeah, that would have been par for the course. And so I'm not certain of the date, but I just want to say that his work has, I think we need to go back, I don't know how possible that would be, to find some of the work that he has done. and show them. You know, JBC lost a lot of its archival information, you know, and then at the University of the West Indies and at Carrimack, because he really did some outstanding work in terms of encouragement and academic and production-wise. He really was great in production. So Mark, and thank you so much for asking me to just share my, I have the assignment, Mark. One day I'm going to find it, take a picture of it and send it to you, because it really flipped my life. It turned my life. I did a pivot. Thanks to your dad, Wenty Bowen.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're a legend, and yet you're so easy to talk to, and you're so hospitable. I mean, it's unbelievable. I feel really humbled, because, and that has been the case with a lot of people. When I mention his name, it opens a door that people want to help me, you know? And that has been a humbling experience, seeing how people have been willing to help him. And I have to ask myself, am I living a life that will make people want to help me or to help my children? So I thank you very much for that tribute. And next up is a professor who taught also at the University of the West Indies, none other than Ian Boxhill, who is also born in Barbados as well. So let's hear Ian Boxhill.
Hi, good evening to all, and in particular Mark, Wayne, Colin. I'm happy to be here and share in this joyful occasion as we recall Wenty. I don't know if you can see me, but this was so important to me that I had an event, and I literally ran from that event to this computer because I indicated to Camille, who had early told me about it, that I could not miss saying a few words in honor of Wenty. I met Wenty, as Peter Espeut said, he worked at ISA, and I met him in the mid-1980s. I first interacted with him, and I did hear about his work with Derek Gordon, etc. But let me also stress what has been said so far about Wenty in terms of being a very soft-spoken person, a wonderful human being, very kind, always giving. When we interacted, I used to write a column a little later, and he would give me comments. Sometimes he would write from wherever he was and send me notes. He was a type of person who would give you good advice, and he would be very, very diplomatic in his criticism of your work. But at the end, you felt as though you communicated with someone who meant very well and who had your interest at heart. Wenty Bowen was a person of great humility. That's one thing that stood out. He never blew his trumpet, never sought praises from anyone. He just did his work quietly, and when called upon to help or assist, he did it quietly and in a very giving way. So again, let me endorse what has been said before. And I just would like to say that on behalf of the University of the West Indies, that there's great appreciation for the work of Wenty Bowen. And indeed, we will be running a tribute on our Mona messaging for him. Hopefully this week. I've already indicated that to the persons in the marketing section that we ought to commemorate the life of this great human being. So once again, let me thank you, Mark, and others. And as Faye said, you know, I hope wherever he is at this moment, listening to us, that his soul will rest in peace.
Thank you so much, Professor Ian Boxhill. He had a lot of respect for you as well. I could kind of hear the tone of his voice change when he mentioned certain names, you know. So I know when he had a lot of respect for someone, you know. And you
Yes.
being a fellow countryman as well, I think made it, there was a connection there from the moment he came to Jamaica, you know. And I know you were a close friend of Wayne as well. So I
Oh,
was
yes,
when you
definitely.
said you took part, you know.
Yes.
Next up on the list, without further ado, because we're trying to move it along briskly. This man is not just a professor, he's Professor Emeritus. He has done work with sustainable development, he has done work with climate change, and he did work with my dad at the University of the West Indies. Interestingly, he's from Guyana originally, but he has worked on all the UWI campuses. This man needs no introduction either in terms of the UWI circles, but I'm speaking of none other than Professor Edward Greene. I'm looking for his name on the list, but Professor Edward Greene, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And my regards to this esteemed colleague and friend, Wentworth Errol Bowen. I had the pleasure of communicating my appreciation for his dedicated and effective service to the Institute of Social and Economic Research in 1990. Imagine, 30 years ago. But it was an occasion in which he was leaving the ISCR to take up an appointment at the Caribbean Institute of Mass Communications, as it was then called. I cannot claim to be a childhood friend of Wenty. We met in the early 70s when he joined the staff of the ICR at UWI Mona, then under the directorship of Alistair McIntyre, to whom I had the honor to be deputy. From this vantage point, our close professional relationship developed. He as editor, I as chair of the editorial board. I can attest to Wenty's inestimable role in ensuring that the Social and Economic Quarterly Journal, established in 1953, maintained its reputation as a flagship of the University of the West Indies. Wenty, as editor, was like the Rock of Gibraltar, calm, dependable, and productive. His contribution, however, extended beyond the quarterly journal. The growing number of books, monographs, and working papers with a range of outstanding research, internationally renowned UWI international scholars, such as the late professors Norman Gervin, George Beckford, Al Francis, and Carl Stone. Indeed, our bonds of friendship and my respect for the talents of Wenty grew when he edited my first book, Race and Politics. My intensive interactions with Wenty demonstrated at firsthand how an editor like him is a precious resource. The glowing acknowledgements to Wenty given by the multitude of authors whose works he literally produced, these are testimonies to his incredible, though underestimated contribution to scholarship at UWI and more generally the Caribbean. Wenty was beyond classification as an editor. A highly regarded colleague aptly referred to him as one who wore his intellectual gifts lightly. Yes, indeed. Overall, Wenty was a great communicator, a student of Caribbean affairs, a proponent of information sciences, an investigative journalist, a videographer, and what I could only describe as a humanist. I witnessed all these attributes at close range. As an illustration, we were part of a team of pollsters. Yes, I was the third pollster. And on election night, I was unavoidably absent from Jamaica because I had other business chairing a conference in Belize. but I did listen in awe and disappointment to the results. We didn't predict a landslide. We predicted a Michael Manley victory. But as it turned out, Edward Seaga's GLP won a landslide victory over Michael Manley. Wenty's performance, as I listened on the radio from afar on RGR during that election night broadcast, was nothing short of insightful, pragmatic, gracious. With great aplomb, he helped the audience to comprehend the frailties of polling, but the importance it plays in trapping views, people's views at a point in time. Just let me say that after that event, we did have a reflection on what happened. And we came to realize it was our first outing on the poll. And we realized what happened. Our polling coordinates in a couple of the marginal constituencies let us down. But let us leave it at that, because as you said, after that disappointment, Carl Stone and myself, and I had to take the burden as the director of the Institute of Social and Economic Research. So no one was more seriously affected than the director of the Institute of Social and Economic Research, who did such, had such a misgiving at elections. So I want you to know that Wenty and I had to really deal with our sorrows at that particular misadventure. But then let us look at some of the positive things. I am sure not many of you realize Wenty's creative talents that extended to the production of classical Jamaica images, including Christmas cards, Christmas greeting cards. I came to this awareness while he was editing my first book. I actually purchased some of these cards. I specifically recall one that I gave to my late wife, Gloria, that tickled her fancy and her endearment. It was entitled, "Me da Carry Straw for the Gal." What a Jamaican way of saying, I adore and I love you. Wenty's cutting wit and satirical imagination are adequately captured in these sentiments relayed in Jamaican dialect. Incidentally, I can't ever recall him speaking in that idiom. However, there are some other contributions, and because of time, I will just marginally refer to them. His production of a phenomenal video in celebration of the 50th anniversary of the ISER in 1998 is a memorable thing. It demonstrated the quality of his creativity. And in fact, I hope that the UWI archives has kept and preserved and conserved this ISER historiography as much as it has preserved the brilliance of Wenty Bowen. But Wenty's success was due to his unquenchable search for information. He was really an archivist as second nature. And I can't recall any better illustration than his being able to unearth a 1975 unpublished article by H.P. Jacobs on Clarendon from his collection, which he provided for a special issue of the Jamaica Daily News. I think time is of the essence, so I will not go into who H.P. Jacob was, but he was, in essence, the vice president of the National Reform Association, born in England, immigrated to Jamaica, and he established with others this National Reform Association, which was the front runner of the People's National Party. So Wenty finding an unpublished article for him on his death was really a source of relief for the community of journalists. And then let me just finally try to wrap up. In addition to his real contribution to publications like higher education in the Caribbean, the university student support for CARICOM integration, Caribbean social studies for secondary schools, his letter to Kingston, and another one on the confrontational politics in Jamaica. All these are things that are legendary. But I think in addition, one of the most recent contributions that I know of was his involvement as a documentalist and screenwriter in the promotion of the third in a three-part series, Sing the Song, including Harry Belafonte. And it premiered on the opening night of the Caribbean Film Festival at Frank Collymore Hall in Barbados. I remember speaking to Wenty about his enthusiasm about this event in April of 2012. But when we spoke on the phone in July 2019, I could not imagine that it would be the last time I would hear that silken, distinctly cultured Barbadian accent with an awareness of graciousness and his presence always in an engagement. He spoke briefly of the void created by his wife, Avril's passing, and the pride that he had for the boys, his boys, as he called them, Wayne, Colin, and Mark. We had agreed to stay in touch and looked forward to doing so when I was due to be in Barbados in April of 2020. COVID intervened, and now his departure from this world, we know. I therefore ask you, Mark, and Wayne, and your families, as well as Colin and the rest of the family, to be comforted by the good times you shared with this outstanding, outstanding human being. No doubt he would wish you to remember him as he was. Please let us remember him fondly, and I hope and pray that his soul would rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. It was really nice to remember some of those days of UWI. UWI was always like the family for him, you know. Everybody at UWI, he seemed to know the entire campus, everybody from the bartender at SCR, Sonny, to you name it. I mean, vice chancellors, he seemed to know them personally. So it always amazed me, you know. And I'm really appreciative of that tribute. Next up, I'll ask Annie Paul to give a few words. Annie Paul is an editor at the university, and she's a critic of literature as well. She was kind enough to compliment some of my feeble attempts at writing when I was doing a blog. So without further ado, Annie Paul, thank you.
Greetings, everyone. It's so good to be part of this memorial for Wenty. And, you know, I've noticed often at occasions like this, one gets to know the person in more depth than one ever knew them in real life, because of the various remembrances by different people who knew him at different stages, I guess. So my knowledge, my acquaintance with Wenty goes back to 1989, which is when I would have met him. That is when I started working at UWI. And it was to do with academic publishing, scholarly publishing, which he was very involved with. And what I haven't heard anyone mention here is what an important role Wenty Bowen played in the establishment of UWI Press. So the group that I was part of, I came on at the tail end, but he was very instrumental in forming a group called the UWI Publishers Association. It was an association of journal editors. UWI, you know, it started out with 3 journals really. Caribbean Quarterly, Social and Economic Studies, and the West Indian Medical Journal. And then different departments, you know, journals started sprouting up all over the 3 campuses. And when the big 3 journals that I mentioned, Wenty was the editor of Social and Economic Studies. And incidentally, it's so strange because when I met him, I could never have imagined that one day I would be, you know, essentially I am now the managing editor of Social and Economic Studies, which was what he used to do, you know. At that time, I was such a novice. He was very instrumental in kind of that introduction to UE and its journals. And he has an excellent article that I was very happy to reread this afternoon in this book called Higher Education in the Caribbean. And what it is an oral history of academic and textbook publishing in Jamaica and the Anglophone Caribbean. And it's also, it also gives you a history of UE Press and of Ian Randall Publishers, the framework of publishing in Jamaica and academic publishing in particular, which he was very much part of. And, you know, 20 or 30 years later, it's very sad to observe that the scene and the publishing scene is largely the same. There are no other big publishers. It's still Ian Randall and UE Press, you know? But what he does in that article, and many of you would, I'm sure, would enjoy reading it if you can get your hands on it. He documents meticulously through interviewing the head of UE Press, the founding founding director, Linda Cameron, and he interviews Ian Randall. So that's why it's called an oral history. And he presents, you know, how these institutions, how these publishing houses were founded. And then very modestly, he instead of starting chronologically with his involvement and so on, he first presents the 2 publishing houses. And then at the back, he adds the very important role that the UWI Publishers Association played in the founding of UWI Press, which, you know, today, who can, you know, who would believe that actually back in the 80s and so on, it was very hard to persuade UWI to form such or to establish such a press. You know, it took a lot of mobilizing and strategizing on the part of people like Wenty Bowen and my predecessor, Janet Luterry, and others. Eddie Greene would have been part of helping. He was one of the allies as director of ISA. So that is how I know Wenty. I mean, my personal remembrance of him is of a very elegant, soft-spoken, as many people have said, very quiet and friendly man who looked like a Bollywood star. You know, he could easily have been in a Bollywood film, and but just, you know, a doer, not a talker. He was not somebody who would hold you down like the ancient mariner and hold you there for 2 hours chatting his mouth off. He was very different, very and I also always felt that although he himself in his person didn't express this, I was sure that he was a very unconventional man. And why was this? Because I know all 3 of his sons, and who could be more unconventional than Wayne and Colin? And I think Mark is probably the reaction against them, the most conventional of the 3. So anyway, I could, you know, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm glad that you organized this, Mark, and this is a lovely way to remember Wenty. And thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much. much. You blended not just his intellectual pursuits and writing pursuits, but also a personal touch of who he is. And I really appreciated that tribute a lot. I had on the program, I think I'm going to make a slight change to the program that I had. We'll pause a bit for a musical tribute at this point, given by Christine MacDonald Nevers. And interestingly, when I was in probably my last year at UA, this would be probably 1993, Daddy decided he was going to act in a play that was being performed mostly by students. So of course I went to support him and went to watch the play. I was a bit taken aback because he seemed to be the oldest person there. Everybody else was young, maybe in their 20s and so on. This man is there in probably, I don't know how old he was at the time. But to my surprise, Daddy was there doing his role just like anybody else. And Christine MacDonald at the time, she actually played his wife in the play. So she knows him very well, you know, and I'm really glad that she's taking part in this. She has accolades as a singer. I think she was a part of the National Folk Singers, so she's no mean, quite an accomplished singer in her own right, but she also knew Daddy very well, you know. And that acting stint by Daddy, at first I was a bit embarrassed because I'm saying, what is Daddy doing in this play? But as I got older, I began to really admire him for what he did. He was not afraid to, yes, risk embarrassment, learn something new, try something new. When I asked him, why are you doing this, Daddy? He said to me that he's interested in writing scripts. So he needs to know what it feels like from the actor's point of view. And it really stuck with me that his willingness to continually learn, it really has stuck with me as part of his whole legacy, you know? So Christine, take it away.
Hi, evening, everybody. And so as Mark was saying, from being part of the University Dramatic Arts Society, and then a few years after that, we also met up at CPTC, Creative Production and Training Center, where I was doing a few courses. So and we worked on another production there also. So it's extended after our time at UA. So, oops, I lost the piece. All right, so I'm going to do I'll Walk with God and enjoy. I'll walk with God from this day on. His helping hand I lean upon. This is my prayer, my humble plea. May the Lord be ever with me. There is no death, though eyes grow dim. There is no fear when I'm near to Him. I lean on His take his hand and talk with God. He'll understand and pray to him each day to him, and he'll hear the words that I say. His heart will guide my heart and hand, and I'll never walk alone while I walk with
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Christine. When you told me the two songs you had in mind, one of them was called You'll Never Walk Alone. And as an Arsenal fan, I know that You Never Walk Alone is the motto and the theme song for Liverpool. So I didn't like the idea of that one at all. But in truth, when I did further research, that song was actually in the movie Carousel, which was one of my dad's favorite movies of all time. So your choices were right on point, and I really appreciate you for that musical tribute tonight. Thank you so much. Next up, I'd like to put in someone who was not originally on the program, but someone who knew my dad very, very well. She worked with him at Carrimac, none other than Marjan deBruin. I hope I'm not putting her on the spot too much. But
no, that's fine.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Wenty was so far we have heard a lot about Wenty's talent, Wenty's products, Wenty's work, Wenty's relevance for the country, relevance for journalism. My text on Wenty is a little more personal. Wenty and I had adjacent offices at Carrimac. I came to Carrimac in '87, and Wenty also went as a full-time lecturer to Carrimac in 1987. So we had adjacent offices, and we were both passionate about journalism and the Caribbean. We encouraged each other a lot to find new ways of journalism and to give special attention to the difficulties of writing in small countries with small networks, especially in. We had very little textbooks at that time on journalism. I mean, textbooks indigenous to the Caribbean. And both of us thought that perfectionism, that even perfectionism was not good enough. So we switched a lot from office to office. We saw each other a lot. And our friendship, our professional friendship very quickly moved to a friendship, especially after he had introduced me to his family. Errol, of course, his wife, his late wife, and the three brothers who were Colin, Wayne, and Mark. At a certain time, maybe half an hour, I was not married to John Maxwell yet, who is a Jamaican. So I was here kind of absorbing all this new environment for me, new cultures, and Wenty was my guidance for a long time. At a particular time when I was also used to the family, Avril asked me to join the Sunday family breakfasts, not at the breakfast table, but at Hellshire. So at an ungodly hour, we went to Hellshire every Sunday at 6 o'clock in the morning or so. But it was for me an enormous support in beginning to feel at home in a country where I actually didn't know anybody except for Agri Brown, who had asked me to teach at Carrimac. So Wenty's, I want to put the emphasis on that side of Wenty, that human side, that personal side, that friendship side. He was very special for me for many reasons. One of the, when I was thinking of what are the main features that I know Wenty perhaps even taught me, because he was such a person who you would give access to your own values and principles, who we would listen to. And one of the things I found amazing for Wenty is that he had a knack for sensing the mood you were in. If you had a problem, he would cheer you up in no time. There was always something that he knew that was irresistible, and especially that chuckle of his. He had this little chuckle that you that took you away right away. A second thing that I found amazing in Wenty was that, yes, he was a hard worker. He could engage with everybody, but Wenty also was a dreamer. Wenty was a dreamer in his heart. And with a dreamer, I don't mean somebody who sits and do nothing, but with a dreamer, I mean somebody who knows where he wants to go, where his purpose is, not in a very planned way, but in a very almost natural way. He was very, very sensitive. He was also romantic. And he had this wonderful, wonderful capacity to produce creative stories on the spot. He gave you that feeling, and gave certainly me the feeling, that he would always be there for you. You just knew that. It was more than the feeling. And I remember that times when I had to travel, and I'm talking about the first couple of years, that both of us were full-time at Carmack. When I had to travel, he would insist taking you to the airport, and no matter what time of day. I mean, you were at the airport, and then you hear that British Airways has a delay. You weren't sitting there by yourself. Wenty would park his car, come out, stay with you. And there have been occasions where we would be sitting there till the morning hours, because he would not leave before he knew I was safe inside and on the plane. So it was an amazing care that he would express in these friendships. And then I thought, what do I admire most in Wenty? Or what did I admire most in Wenty? And that was the consistency that he had with his own personality. You know, you have people who can kind of fly all over the place and be this and that, very good. But Wenty had a very steady consistency. He stood for what he found important. He stuck to what he believed in. And he ignored what he thought was trivial as far as it was concerned on him. He would listen to any triviality that I may have put on the table. But in his own engagement and in his own thoughts, he was very, very reliable. In a way, it matched perfectly with Avril, which I would like to include in our conversation. It was a major Bacon. Bacon is the wrong word. She was a major pillar for him. It matched perfectly with her. And Avril, I'm sure all of us know that Avril is his late wife. Avril was also somebody who would say what she wanted to say, but she has also a special way of saying it. You never felt that you were kind of waltzed over. You were there and you would listen. For instance, what will never drop out of my memories is that when I was more and more with the family at Crescent, with or without coming or going to Hellshire, I had noticed that in the back of Annette Crescent, of the house, there was a bedroom, a master bedroom. Sometimes their door was open. And I was just amazed because I saw these enormous walls, all with newspapers and journals. So it was from ceiling, from bottom to ceiling, from floor to ceiling, and from left to right. And I could just see a kind of small alley that you would have to walk in order to get further into the bedroom. I also noticed that was an, what is the word in English? It was a thorn in Errol's side. It was a house in which there was not much room for this kind of passion. So all these extra walls were very mysterious. And Errol, at one point, I mean, at several times, I heard Errol having an effort to get this absolutely unbelievable, but also unchangeable package in the master bedroom, to get that down to nothing again. And their discussions were so interesting because both of them had a very graceful way, a very discussions, and could feel that their interaction was genuine, but they both stood to that point. After Wenty and Errol moved to Barbados, I tried to see both of them every time. I had to be in Bridgetown, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I did not know until last week that Wenty was actually in our before he died. While I was not able to cross his path, I am very grateful for the memories of this friendship that was so special for me. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm very happy I'm with you and hear all these different segments of Wenty's life that has been so important for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marjan. You put a unique spin on it from your perspective. You saw them as a couple. You used to share in the beach trips, which Nigel Elliott even mentioned that to me recently, how for our family, the beach was a ritual, you know? Yes, usually on a Sunday, we'd be at Hellshire Beach, Fort Clarence, sometimes as far as Duns River Falls and stuff like that. And you were always great company. I know both of my parents enjoyed being around you, you know, your free-spiritedness, and you were just down to earth with all of us. So I really appreciate that. And you were one of the first people that I thought of when we were coming back to Jamaica. You know, I was thinking in my mind, who would he like to see? Who would he like to visit? I didn't tell many people about him coming back because COVID restricted everything and you don't want people to be there trying to come to the house until it's safe to just do so, you know? So I really appreciate that contribution. Next up is someone else who is also affiliated with CARIMAC and also affiliated with CPTC. I personally interacted with him at work. My boss thought that I needed a lot of help with public speaking, sent me on a course to do public speaking, and the next presenter is Mr. Livingston White, who turned out to be the greatest public speaking coach ever, even though I might not be the best example of that. So, Mr. Livingston White, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me to this evening's function. Good evening, everyone. There are those of us who bring a light so great to the world that even after they are gone, the light remains. Wenty Bowen was a senior lecturer at CARIMAC from 1987 to 1994. He taught courses in writing the fact film, writing the dramatic film, writing news for broadcast, radio and television and print, introduction to the aesthetics of film, the art of feature writing, and introduction to media research. Before becoming a full-time member of the CARIMAC staff in 1987, he worked in a part-time capacity teaching courses in journalism, script writing, and sociology. Lorna K. Bailey, one of his students when he taught at CARIMAC in 1991, says, he was calm and gentle, a very pleasant, respectable, and respectful professional. Denver Stevenson Miller, another former student who now works as operations manager at OCM Productions, a media production and post-production company, remembers being very happy in 1989 that Mr. Bowen was her Caribbean Studies advisor because he listened and was easy to talk to and share her ideas. She recalls, he was thoughtful, gave good advice and guidance. His critique was constructive and brought out the best in her work. He was a lovely person and had a calm, reassuring presence. After working at Carimac, he moved on to becoming the Director of Training and Human Resource Development at the Creative Production and Training Center, CPTC. At that time, I would have begun my studies as a student at Carimac, and so I was never taught by Mr. Bowen at Carimac. While I studied at Carimac, I worked at the CPTC on a teenage talk show, Rapping, and we were required to attend the training sessions offered to media practitioners. It was then that I was fortunate to have been a part of short courses on writing for television that Wenty Bowen taught while at the CPTC. He will be remembered by his students as a gentle and humble individual, never one to boast about his achievements. Carimac benefited from Wenty Bowen's years of service as a lecturer. He contributed to developing the curriculum, particularly in writing for the various media platforms. One of the courses he taught then in the 80s and 90s is still being offered today, The Art of Feature Writing, and is still attracting healthy numbers in student registration. The skill of writing is a core skill in the Carimac curriculum, and one can't help but think of the integral role he would have played in developing the writing skills of his many students. Such is the greatness of Wenty Bowen, and we remain grateful today that he helped to lay the foundation for a Carimac that would later become a school offering a range of undergraduate degree programs in journalism, digital media production, film production, animation, integrated marketing communication, and graduate degrees in media management and communication for social and behavior change. For all the students and staff of Carimac, UWI Mona, who would have benefited from their interactions with our former senior lecturer in writing, who would have been inspired by his gentle and calm approach to life, we say farewell, Mr. Bowen, farewell. May your soul rest in peace.
Thank you so much, Mr. White. Always a pleasure to hear you speak, you know. In a sense, you kind of followed in his footsteps in certain ways, you know. I was glad to hear that you were working at Carimac. Up next, I'm going to ask Lorna Napier, who is also affiliated with CPTC. In fact, I believe she's the CEO of CPTC. She's also an attorney at law. She's active in the Kiwanis. So, Lorna Napier.
Napier.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, this is Lorna Napier. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you, but most people have their mics on mute, so you won't get that feedback that you get from a normal crowd. We're hearing you very well.
Very well. Thank you very much for inviting me. I bring you greetings on behalf of the management and staff of the Creative Production and Training Center Limited, an agency of the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. I'm the acting CEO. Well, it is with deep regret that we learned of the transition of our former Director of Training and Human Resource Development, Wentworth Errol Bowen, affectionately called Wenty. Wenty's association with the CPTC began with a proposal to the late Wycliffe Bennett, then CEO, to teach 2 courses in television scriptwriting in the areas of television documentaries and television plays. This was July 1994. Now, if anyone knows Mr. Bennett well, you would also know that he was not going to employ anyone with such skills on a part-time basis. So he made an offer to Wenty, and by September of that year, Wenty was the new Director of Training and HRD at the CPTC. Wenty spent 4 years with the CPTC, where he fostered a spirit of self-help in upgrading the skills and background knowledge of the staff, and several members who at the time lacked tertiary education, although having the potential and interest for creditable achievement. He was also responsible for the maintenance of the multimedia library, and he spent a lot of time there each day with the librarians and the staff. He developed special courses in news documentary writing and dramatic writing. He got the agreement of industry personnel to teach on the various course offerings by the CPTC, at the time delivering these new short courses as summer workshops. Wenty was instrumental in my foray into media training. Having returned from a course overseas in 1997, he called me into his office. He wanted to know what I learned. His eyes lit up when I told him about my screenwriting tutors and how they introduced me to writing cinematic text. Well, Wenty did not do a thing but sent me a memorandum a day later to inform me that I would now teach Introduction to Script Writing on the Techniques of Video Production course. And in a matter of hours, he was happily reviewing my lesson plans and offering suggestions of teaching materials. My former co-worker, Louis McLean, speaks fondly of the valuable advice sessions that Wenty would have with him too, when he was scripting his first solo production for television called Impressions. That was the mettle of the man. He only needed to know that you were going to work on something, and he was there to help you and to make sure that you did a great job. By 1998, the business model of the CPTC changed, and Wenty decided to do other things. He decided that he wanted to go back to his first love, which is writing. He wanted to go back to his photography in a big way and to produce and direct a masterpiece that he had crafted nicely on paper. You know, Wenty believed that the CPTC as an organization had a great contribution to make to the development of Jamaica and the Caribbean. He believed in the mandate to record and preserve the heritage of the Jamaican people. And so even in his retirement, he would write to me occasionally for updates of the work of the organization and give suggestions as to training and business development initiatives. Well, we will fondly remember him as the gentleman, the erudite, the professional, the manager, the mentor, who inspired a cadre of media workers who are not at the peak of their craft, training other persons. And all of this was only possible because of that proposal that he wrote in 1994. So to you, his family and close friends, we ask that you accept our sincere condolences, and may his soul find eternal rest and light perpetual shine upon him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Napier. I'm not even sure if it's Miss or Mrs. I hadn't had the pleasure of meeting you before, but immediately when I thought of tributes, I knew that CPTC had to be an integral part of it. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I believe CPTC saved my father's life. When he resigned from the university, I'd seen my toe moping around as if he had lost his purpose, lost his way. He was one of these people who identified himself with his work. He wanted to be doing something useful. And when Mr. Wycliffe Bennett called him and said, let's get rolling, he was a different man. I could see the pep was back in his step, you know. He was glad to be back in the media world again. He put on his jacket and his tie and he was out there. So CPTC has been great to him, you know. And I really appreciate that tribute. It touched me. It's going to get a little more personal now, guys, because we're going to be speaking with people who knew him not necessarily on a professional level, but more on a personal level. So first up will be someone all the way from Barbados. She's actually a distant cousin of mine, more than a friend, Lynn Swanston. And Daddy used to, when he was living in Barbados, he'd have lunch with both Lynn and her mom. They're really close to him and they were very kind to him. So she presents a different perspective on his whole, the transition when he was living in Barbados. She'll give an insight into how he lived there, you know? So thank you again.
Good evening, everyone. I was a little tentative about doing this because I only knew him since 2008. However, I must say that I knew his mother even before, not personally, but she was a person who shopped at the same supermarket as my mother, and you had to know her. So, you know, in terms of being a very creative person, very helpful, and all the workers in there knew and loved her, and they would often go and help her, this little old lady, and everybody loved his mom. When he returned in 2008, Avril was my mother's first cousin, and she came visiting my mom, and they would pass every Thursday after he visited his mother. They would come, stop, have tea, or sit down and talk. Of course, my mom and they would be talking. So then finally, I started to talk with Mr. Bowen, as I used to call him then. But Wenty was a person that you had to open up to, and I did that. And one of the things that when I first visited his house, I often thought I was a book lover. But when I visited his house, I gave him credit. His books almost had me floored. He had a wide variety and a number of different areas, and you could almost talk with him on any subject. But he was very, very private person. One of the things that I always remember is that in 2017, he said, "Oh, I went to the doctor and I've been diagnosed with breast cancer." Can you imagine that? A man having breast cancer. I said, "Well, I hope you're going to take good care of it and get everything done." He said, "I'll think about it." That was his beginning. And you know, we need to be very consistent about friends and helping them along the way. And I apologize because I did not follow through. But from talking now, I realized that when he made up his mind, very few people could change him from what he wanted to do. And he did not want surgery at his age, and he was prepared to live his life to the fullest. And the thing about it is that I actually sent his sons something, because I teased him one time and told him, "Wait, you never write your autobiography yet. I only get in your life in snippets and little bits here, there, here from talking to you. I need to be able to sit down and understand you." And he actually wrote and printed some thoughts on his life and book about what his work is. So when these people are talking now, I can find it in the paper of all the things. But as they said, he was a very private person, and he did not bring out the things that you all did, because as you said, he was a gentleman, quiet, soft-spoken, and he didn't bring out all the things. He enjoyed working at some of these places. And the thing about it is that one of the things that I admired is that when he came back here, he knew why he came back here. He said he left at 19 years old, and now he's back. He's going to take care of his mother. Sometimes when the car was down, he would call me and tell me, "Come, take me up. I want to visit my mother." And he did that twice a week, every time. And if I didn't have the car, I would usually make arrangements, so he would get his neighbor to take him, David, to take him up. But most of the time on Sundays, I would take him. And the thing about it is that his mom knew when he was there. You would see a change and as she went down, when I thought she was gone one time and he came in, I said to myself, she opened her eyes and she looked at him, and then he just rubbed her hand. He was a loving person. He rubbed her hand and she just opened her eyes and smiled at him. So she really knew when he was there, and he was very diligent at that, going and visiting his mother. One of the things in his things that he wrote in 2017 about the future, and I know this is, I'm going to read it out because he left me with things to send up to Jamaica for him. I don't think he was expecting to go so fast. And he just left me with a list of things to do. And this is what he wrote in 2017 about his future. I don't know how much of a future I've got, but I have lots of article ideas to keep me busy for several more lifetimes. But alas, we only get one lifetime at a time. Still, I intend to try and make the most of what time I get, and I want to use it to write about the West Indies as a nation. Right now, the West Indies are a nation without a country. I want to see if I can get us thinking about being a country again, a West Indies nation where we live in a unified country rather than in a collection of petty states. A USWI, a United States of the West Indies. If that is possible, is that an impossible dream? Not if we can inspire the right sort of leadership, a job for you to pursue as well, in films, in music, in stories, books, and articles. So out there we have a number of university people, and one of the things that all of us as West Indians should do is try to make sure that we realize that we are a people all together. We should be one country rather than being very petty in terms of looking at each of us as being a country nation. We need to be a region and strive for unity. And that was one of the things. He was a very peaceful person. You couldn't get him to quarrel or be angry. I can say that all the time. I have been with him 10 years, nearly 12 years. I have never seen him angry. And as you said, he's a peaceful person. I hope that Colin, Wayne, his grandchildren, who he loved and often talked about, would remember him and keep him in their hearts, as we all will when we remember things that he has done for us. So to everyone who will be missing him, keep him in your heart, and let's all remember the good things that he has done for each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And thank you for being so kind to him over the years. And that thanks goes out to your mom as well. Forgive me, but next up is a man who I call simply Uncle Glen. He's actually a great dentist. He lives in Canada part of the year, and then part of the year he spends it in the warmer climes of Barbados. Both he and his lovely wife Heather have been very kind to my dad. He knows my dad from he was a youngster. So he puts a really different spin on everything. He knows Daddy from when Daddy was a little boy. So Uncle Glen, thank you. Just unmute and we.
Oh, hello, everybody.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Greetings.
Thanks for this opportunity to say a few words about Wenty. I am going to make a few comments. Basically, I didn't know him as a little boy. I knew him when I was a little boy. I first met Wenty for the first time when I was around 7 years at the residence of 40 Robert Street, a bustling commercial street in the heart of Bridgetown. Not knowing at that time that we were destined by circumstances neither of us had ever anticipated to spend the next 6 years of our lives together. In a household that included at that time Wenty's mother, our grandmother, an aunt, my father, an older brother and sister, my younger brother, and myself. The family dynamics of this arrangement, coupled with the economic uncertainty at that time, created challenges which manifested themselves in ways that do not permit discussion other than the following comments. The living space was cramped, there were limited outdoor play areas, and consequently, we turned the living room into our playground. The problem was we had to compete for that area with Wenty, who used that space as a study area and whose head was perpetually buried in a book. The only break Wenty took was at mealtime, and even then, his reading material accompanied him to the table. Wenty's reading addiction did not go unnoticed by my grandmother, whose constant admonition to my brother and me was, read a book. Wenty shielded himself from the distractions of a non-ideal home life by creating his own fantasy world. He created his own comic book characters and dabbled in art, using my brother and me as subjects for his drawings, and also took to playing the mouth organ for an extended period of time, expanding his repertoire of tunes along the way. He developed at the same time a very deep interest in bodybuilding, so much so that the owner of the gym entrusted to him the gym contents when he migrated overseas. Finally, in the continuing of activities, Wenty immersed himself in learning magic. Abracadabra became the mantra around the house, with a black cape and wand to match. The other enduring memory of the time at Robert Street was Wenty's experiment in learning to dance. Not having a live dance partner was no deterrence. A chair became his default partner. With dance manual in hand and imagined strains of the Blue Danube waltz filling the air, the living room of 40 Robert Street was transformed into a solo dance hall, whilst my brother and I looked on bewildered. In 1954, Wenty left Barbados for St. Kitts at the urging of his mother, and I lost total contact with him for the next 53 years. In 1954, we were connected in 2007 when he returned to Barbados to be with his elderly mother, and to no surprise, his world still revolved around books. It is fair to say there wasn't a book that did not pique his interest. On reflection, and from my personal observations, Wenty lived life on his own terms. He was humble by nature and neither judgmental or confrontational. And if, as Bob Dylan, the songwriter, puts it, a man is a success if he gets up in the morning and goes to bed at night and in between does what he wants to do, then Wenty was eminently successful. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. So many things you touched on in that really resonate with me. You touched on the comic books. When we were younger, Wayne will remember that Daddy used to draw comic books and kind of personalize it for Wayne. That helped Wayne to develop his reading ability really fast. And then, of course, I followed along as a comic maniac as well. And you're so right about him reading just about anything. There's no topic that he didn't want to know about. And as a result of that, he's a person who you could literally have an interesting conversation to him about almost anything. There's hardly a topic that he was totally uninformed about. And he's a person who would also research. So if you manage to mention something that he didn't know about, by the next time you spoke to him, he would know so much about it that it would astound you. So a lot of what he said really resonated, you know. I didn't know much about his personal life as a youngster. He didn't really talk about it. So I got the feeling it was not an easy life.
It wasn't.
It wasn't a topic that I felt like I could bring it up and, you know, discuss. So maybe another time we'll get more into what you know of that, you know. But very interesting. And the dancing part of it reminded me of something that his cousin Annette Beer said to me. She mentioned to me some of the dancing adventures, you know, which was a bit of a surprise to me. But now that I'm hearing it again, I have to say, okay. And the bodybuilding is also interesting. He would always encourage us to lift weights, but I didn't realize how early this love of that had started. You know, he realized that you could literally transform your body similar to how he was trying to transform his mind with the books. So for me, he's my superhero, but hearing you talk about the comics kind of resonated with me on that, you know. Really appreciate that tribute. And now the final two tributes will be from, well, for this segment. After that, we'll throw it out for anyone else who may have something pressing that they want to mention about him or a memory. But for the last two that I have on my list, it's Nigel Elliott, and my brother Wayne will close us off for that segment. So thank you very much, Uncle Glenn. And
Thank you, no problem.
We'll move on to Dr. Nigel Elliott, I should say. His patients are some of the wealthiest in Jamaica, but they're actually animals. He's a top-class veterinarian. He went to Tuskegee Institute. And how am I able to talk to him? Because he lived across the road from me when I was growing up. In fact, Nigel Elliott, when I learned to ride a bicycle, it was Nigel Elliott who taught me. So close friend of the family, and he's going to give his perspective on my dad. Thank you very much, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good evening to all. It was so interesting listening to your Uncle Ben there, because some of my tributes, I'll mention some things that he mentioned too that we saw when we were your neighbors back in the day. So this is a tribute to Mr. Bowen, our neighbor and friend, as we, the Elliots, grew up with the Bowens for nearly over 30 years. I have my brother Michael and Victor here. Mom is still around, but unfortunately she couldn't join us, but she does send her greetings to you guys. What does over 30 years of having good neighbors look or feel like? What is it about them that will just make you feel good? Sometimes a bit envious, sometimes comparing, but with a sense of security. Definitely grateful, and most importantly, love. Well, having the Bowens as your neighbors summed all that up. A family of 3 boys, led by the tall, serious-looking gentleman, but with a subtle sense of humor. And he was a Cub Scout leader. That was Wentworth Bowen. We still up to this time just call him Mr. Bowen. We felt welcome always into that home. We grew up together from in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in a quaint and quiet area of John Blair called Grovedale Drive. As Mark said, we lived across the road where those 3 legendary almond trees grew, for any of you who have remembered coming around to Grovedale Drive. They represented us 3 boys, me and my 2 other brothers, similar to Mr. Bowen's, Wayne, Colin, and Mark. And later came another set of boys, the Schoolers, Carlos, Andre, and Christopher. Then we were the self-proclaimed boys of Grovedale Drive. As young boys, we were fascinated with the Bowens. They were very inviting once Charlie was locked up though. We spent many a days there, played games, eating Mrs. Bowen's baked treats, and interestingly reading. Yes, reading. I personally am grateful to them for helping me to enjoy reading. Although most of the reading there were from their comic book collections, their vast comic book collections, you couldn't but be in awe when you entered Mr. Bowen's library and saw the compilation of his book collections. I recall sometimes just going through that place, his library, searching for old comics, but end up flipping through encyclopedias, history books, current books of the time. I believe that may have led our parents to invest in an encyclopedia set for us. Quiet warrior Mr. Bowen was. He commanded respect from and to all of us in the neighborhood. Keeping in touch was also a hallmark of his. When he and his late dear wife, Avril of blessed memory, moved to Boston, they kept in touch with our parents. I even remember getting a call from them when I was in vet school in Alabama. During the times when our mom and Mr. Bowen lost their spouses, that neighborly comradeship continued via phone calls up to the time he felt ill. Mark summarized it recently when we spoke. You guys are the best that it gets. Guys, Wayne, Colin, Mark, if we haven't said it, we are saying it now. Thank you guys for a wonderful early friendship and neighborly love. Thank you also, Mr. Bowen. May his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine on him.
Thank you so much, Nigel. And it's as if the two families were really intertwined, each family having 3 boys. I was the only one who didn't attend the famous Woolmer's Boys School. So every day I'd hear about how great Woolmer's Boys School is. But really a lot of great memories, comic books, other games that we used to play and so forth. And there was some envy on both sides, I must say. I mean, yes, my dad was this intellectual, but believe me, he used to admire how your dad would take care of the garden and everybody seemed to be so chummy together and so forth. You know, he would love to emulate that sometimes, but that's how it is, you know. So thank you so much. So we started off with your brother Michael and we pretty much ended with you. Wayne is the only person left on our official list of tributes. And that's because of how close the families were. We really could not do this without you. And Junior was the first doctor that I called when we were trying to come back to Jamaica because, you know, I figured he'd need some medical help, and we know you're an expert doctor as well, but I thought it best to call Junior since he's a heart surgeon, you know. So thanks again, Nigel.
Okay.
And up next, Wayne. Wayne, of course, is the eldest of Wentworth Bowen's sons. So
okay, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's great seeing all of you and great listening to the tributes. I jotted down a few notes today. I hope it won't go too long. Can you hear me? I see Lynn looks like she can't hear me. Can you hear me, Mark?
yes, we can hear you, but most people have their mics on mute.
Oh, okay.
Background sound to interrupt you.
Okay, cool. And Nigel, thank you very much. Michael, Junior, everybody, all of you. I heard some things I didn't know, so it was great. Some of what I'm going to say might be inaccurate. Y'all can fill me in on the real deal later. Because remember, a lot of these memories are from when we were children. And quite often as a child, you see things one way, and that's not really how it was. Or you hear snippets of information, and you know you interpret it some kind of way, and it might not be totally correct. But I'm just going to read a few of what I jotted down not too long ago. To me, Wenty was a very interesting person. He encouraged us to read and believe in ourselves. He was extremely humble, quiet, soft-spoken. He rarely ever raised his voice. In fact, I can't remember ever hearing him shout, to tell you the honest truth. And we lived with him our whole lives. He could be angry with you and you would not really know. You would have to just know him to see some little change in the furrow of his brow or something. And that made it difficult to argue with him anyway, because he tended to just agree with everything you said and then confound you later by doing exactly what you thought he had agreed not to do. He never used bad words, or he probably did in his mind or maybe with his friends, but around us, he never swore. You know, if you heard him say damn or bloody, you knew, boy, he was approaching anger now, and that was something serious. He had wide-ranging interests, you know, from dance to nature to history to insects, you know, the behavior of bats, all kinds of stuff you wouldn't believe. He was a regionalist. He believed firmly in the Caribbean. He was not a preacher, but he knew more about world religions than most preachers I ever met. He was not an artist, but he knew as much about art and world history of art as most graduate students at art school. Neither was he a politician, but he had a grasp of all the political isms you could think of: communism, socialism, fascism, capitalism. And what was more interesting, he could break those down to you and explain them to you in a very, very simple way that left you totally understanding what it meant to be a capitalist or what it meant to be a Donald Trumpist. We never had a lot of money growing up, although Jamaica has so much poverty that to many, we would have all seemed rich. And I know Nigel, Michael, and Junior could attest to this, and even my cousins, Stephen and Melanie and so on. In Jamaica, we would have been probably considered middle class, but there were so many people that were poor. I mean, they lived in shacks and everything right around us, you know? But so we never felt rich, but at the same time, we had a rich life because our parents, especially Wenty, they had wide-ranging interests. So we were always going to watch like the National Dance Theatre Company, which was a dance company in Jamaica. We went to the pantomime. Whenever there was a touring group of Chinese or whatever was going on, you know, he would take us to these things, flower shows, museums, all that kind of stuff. And it stimulated your brain, you know. It was always an interesting situation. He was not born in Jamaica, nor was my mother. Wenty was born in Barbados, and my mother was born in St. Kitts. But both of them loved Jamaica, and they would always tell people, they became citizens. And if anyone ever asked them when we're overseas, they would always say, we're Jamaican. They were very proud of the island, they believed in it, and they believed in the Caribbean region generally. Of course, them not being Jamaican presented certain challenges for us as children, or for me. You know, we didn't know certain words, certain patois, such certain dialect words. So if someone said to me, you need to go eat some junjo or junjo, I didn't know what the hell that was. It was later I found out that that meant mushrooms, you know, but my parents couldn't tell me what a junjo was, you know, things like that. They didn't know about Christmas Grand Market, where, you know, people would go to downtown to buy things at Christmas time and stuff like that. But they still encouraged creativity and pride in the country and stuff like that. My father, coming from Barbados, and my mother as well, they didn't really have this strong racial thing that you find a lot in Jamaica, where people want to know if you're white or black or Chinese or what. You know, my father actually found it quite amusing that people always would refer to him as coolie man or Indian man or brown man or pretty hair man. He found that kind of amusing because in Barbados, when he was growing up, you were either white or you were black. And he was firmly black because his grandfather was a tall white man. His grandmother was a short black woman. And of course, his mother looked like him, very mixed. So in Jamaica, if she came to visit us, people would say, yo, coolie woman. You know, but my father found all of that amusing because everybody thought he was this Indian guy. And in his mind, he thought he was this black guy. So, but it was not something he would speak about or talk about a lot, you know. When I was a small child and complained about people calling me coolie and saying I have a funny accent, he quickly reminded me that I'm Jamaican and we should be proud to be Jamaican, and that the motto of the country is out of many one people. And don't worry what people say, just be proud in yourself and hold your head up high, whether you're Indian, Chinese, white, black, whatever, you're a person. if I were to say to someone, my father was a great man, they would probably smile and smirk because it would just sound like some kid bigging up his father. And you know how children are, they want to think their parents are heroes. But to me, there were two things that made my father a great man. First, he married my mother. And second, he saved me from drowning one day at the beach. The funny thing is, up to the day he died, he did not know that he had saved my life, because we used to go to this beach in Kingston called Cable Hut Beach, and it had these huge waves. I think people go there to surf now, but we liked it because Wenty had taught us how to body surf, you know, just dive out in front of the wave and let the wave push it in. Well, one day we were there and this wave took me and it rolled me upside down, and it was like in slow motion. I'm there holding my breath, and I feel myself being pulled way out, and I said, yeah, this is it. I was probably 8 years old, but I just kept holding my breath. I didn't know which way was up. And then out of the blue, a hand grabbed me, and it was Wenty, and he had this big laugh, and he said, the waves here can really get rough, eh? And he didn't realize I was struggling, and I never told him. But that, to me, made him great. My brother and I, Colin, because Mark is like 9, almost 10 years younger than I am. So for a lot of my life, it was just, the early life, it was just me and Colin. We grew up at Wenty's feet, watching him edit films at the Jamaica Information Service, downtown Kingston. They used to have an office at the corner of Beeston Street and North Street, right near to the Jamaica Gleaner Company, which is like the premier newspaper in Jamaica. And he used to edit film there because that's what they used in those days. And that was quite an inspiring thing for us because we got to see a lot of programs before they came on television and things like that. His work as a journalist introduced us to so many people and so many situations that it totally inspired us, along with his books. By the time we went to prep school or high school, it was as if we had had a university education, you know? And him and my mother would speak to people from any background. My father could not leave a beggar, no matter how dirty or nasty or smelly or whatever. He could not talk to that person or give the person money or try to inspire them. And it was a sort of embarrassment a lot of the time, but that's how he was, you know. We would visit people like, we used to go downtown Kingston to Riverton City, which now it's like a big dump for Kingston, like a garbage dump. There were guys that used to live there, including a very famous Rasta musician. He was either from Mystic Revelation of Rasta or Michael, Sons of Negus. I can't remember, but that guy, we used to go and talk to that guy and went to set up drumming lessons for Colin and myself. Unfortunately, it never ever came to fruition. We used to go and visit people like Peter Abrams, a journalist from South Africa, who lived up in the hills, and he was married to a British woman. He was a black South African and an author, and he had gone to live in Jamaica and loved Jamaica. From his house, we would hear all these inspiring conversations between him and Wenty and my mother and his wife, and you could also at nighttime see Cuba from his house. So it was an inspiring situation. You know, there was an artist called Carl Parbu Singh. Some people would know him. He's a famous Jamaican artist. He lived up in the hills, Sligoville, and we went up there, and again, great conversation and everything. In fact, my father made a film about Carl Parbu Singh, and we went up there many times. And I was surprised one day when visiting Jamaica, I saw this program on television and it brought back all these memories, but Wenty's name was nowhere on this program. And I spoke to Wenty and I said, didn't we go up to Parbu Singh's place with you many times and do this program? And he said, yeah, and he laughed when I told him it had someone else's name as a director and editor and everything, and he didn't care about that. I was angry about it, but he just found it amusing, you know? We visited people like, there was a guy called Claudius Henry, his son had tried to lead a revolution in Jamaica. So we were learning things about the history of the country and everything, though we were very young. He used to do articles about vacation spots in the island, and we'd go all over the island, seeing these places while he photographed and interviewed people. You know, places like Paul Bogle's property. Paul Bogle is a Jamaican freedom fighter and national hero. We went to where that guy's house used to be, and as a child, it looked like a huge place with about 20 old-to-eat apple trees. And it was just amazing, you know, the museums, all these things that they were introducing us to. I also met, when he was working for the Jamaica Daily News, this great artist, Neville Garrick, who used to work with Bob Marley. Neville Garrick was the one that designed the Sunday magazine for that newspaper. And in later years, Neville Garrick was a person who took a tape of my music to Chris Blackwell and got us signed up to Island Records to release a single there. So it was just funny, like Mark had said, you know, you meet people and they would remember Wenty and it would open up doors for you. There were many people who had stories of them working with him and they would make a mistake, like they got to film somewhere, they didn't have film in the camera, they go back to the studio and the whole thing is shot and they think Wenty would cuss them out and he'd just smile at them and say something like, don't worry, we'll go back and do it again. Or he would pretend to be angry and say, don't do it again. But, you know, he was always very quiet and grateful and he didn't hold a grudge, you know. People were talking about his book collection and that was a source of real annoyance, really, but it was also a source of inspiration. I mean, when he died, he left like maybe 20 of those big shipping barrels of books over at the neighbor's house, which is very embarrassing. But it's not just at that neighbor's house. He left barrels like that, maybe 20, 30 books at about barrels at maybe 4 other people's houses in the United States. So he had so many books, he could have probably bought 5 or 10 houses. As a matter of fact, when we were young, there was a time when our dentist was running away from Jamaica because of Michael Manley, I think. He thought the place was going communist. And I remember being at the dentist and the dentist said, "Oi, Wenty, you want to buy my house? It's for sale." And Wenty said, "Okay," but he was kind of shaky, but my mother said, "Yes, yes, yes." And we went and looked at the house. It was a beautiful house. Each room was about double the size of the rooms we lived in. It had a great living room, a great garden in the back, landscape, everything. And all of a sudden, I thought we were buying it. And then all of a sudden, I heard we weren't buying it. So I said, "What happened to the house?" And went to laugh and said, "Boy, Wayne, if I bought that house, I'd never be able to buy books again for the next 10 years. And I was so disappointed, but laughed at the same time. But my mother said he was joking, so he was really pulling my legs. But he did have a lot of books, and it was weird. One thing about having a father who was in the public eye was that people would come up to him and want to know him. Even though in Jamaica, we don't really celebrate people the way they do in the US, running to get their autographs. But there were people that would come and ask for his autograph and stuff like that. And we as children found that amusing because he's just an ordinary guy. And because of that, we have never really had this hero worship for people, whether they be politicians, movie stars, or whatever, to the point where I think some people think we're disrespectful, you know. And I remember one day being at school and the teacher said to me, "Oh, you Bowen, I see your father on TV last night drinking ganja tea. That's why you and your brother behave like that." Apparently, Wenty had been on his television program talking with some Rastafarians, and he was drinking ganja tea, or he was drinking something which this lady told me was ganja tea. And it was interesting, you know. I mean, I would also say I heard about him being a boy musician, which we heard about earlier. But the way I heard the story was that one day my grandmother came home and saw him performing magic for his cousins and friends, and she got outraged, took all his magic stuff and threw it away and said, "Wenty, I don't want nobody in the family being an Obia man." And that was the end of his magic career. But I might have the story wrong, and it would have to let me know the real story. And another thing people would know about him, he could draw. You know, that was a talent that developed when he was very, very young. He was visiting someone and they gave him pencils and papers to keep him quiet. And when they were ready to leave the house, he gave them back the papers and pencils, and he had sketched everybody that was there, and it looked exactly like them. And he was only about 9 years old, and the people were shocked. What? You know, they were amazed at things like that. He knew how to use guns. You know, he had been in the cadet force in Barbados and was a sharpshooter. But every time in Jamaica, he always would talk about how he hated guns. No matter how violent the country got, he would not, you know, buy a gun or anything to protect himself. He would not criticize you if you made mistakes. And his favorite punishment when we were children would be to send us to stand in the corner for a few minutes. I remember once he had a very valuable stamp collection. It had stamps in it. Some of them were worth £10,000, £20,000, £30,000. And I found termites in the collection and threw it away. And then I was worried about what to tell him when he came home. And he just said, "You throw all the stamps away?" And I said, "Yeah," but I was worried because this was a stamp collection. I've never seen so many British West Indian stamps in my entire life. And it was worth more than 250,000 American dollars. He just chuckled and said, "Well, you know, next time you're throwing away my stamps, just wait till I come home and let's see if we can save any of them." He never mentioned it to me again, ever. And it was something that embarrassed me for a long time. Another thing, I remember once there was a girl I really liked, and she used to, I had a crush on her, she had a crush on me, but she was very aggressive, so I was afraid of her. And she used to phone the house at all hours and say all kind of weird things to me. We were only platonic, and I'm not saying that because my wife and children are here. We were really just platonic. And we still are platonic friends to this very day. But the girl used to phone my house and say some really, I'm not lying to you, really suggestive things that would make you blush. Things like what she would want me to do. She would want to do to me and what she would want me to do with her. And I don't know. I know it would be hard to believe, but I was very shy. So one day, the phone rang, and it was about the time when the girl would usually phone me. So I ran out to my room, only to see Wenty pick up the telephone, and he's listening, not saying anything. And then he suddenly says, "I think you want to speak to my son." Wayne, he hands me the telephone. It's the girl talking. She didn't even realize it was not me she was talking to. She was still talking, thinking Wenty was me. And I sat down there changing colors and feeling embarrassed, but he never ever said anything about that, you know. Like I say, he was an interesting person to live with. And the last little anecdote I'll tell you is that he was a very brave man. And I would say that not just because he used to write newspaper columns criticizing powerful people and get death threats and still continue doing it. He would write articles for foreign newspapers and magazines, and whenever he filed those news articles overseas, our phone would be locked off for like 2 to 3 weeks. And that was a regular occurrence. So you knew someone somewhere was deliberately doing this. But that's not why I say he was brave. Why I say he was brave is because we had a situation which is probably stupid. My mother and I thought it was stupid, where one of our neighbors, she lost her husband, and people started targeting her. They would fish things out of her window, steal things from her car, and so on. And sometimes at night, she would shout out saying people are robbing her. You know, she'd say, "Thief, thief, thief." And Wenty would go over there in the middle of the night and let her turn on the lights and walk all the way around the house to make sure there was no one there. I don't know if he thought she was imagining it, But it happened many times, and he did that many times, and we begged him not to go. Until one day, he went over there. She was crying out for thief, thief. And when Wenty went around the side of the house, we saw two young men running from the other side of the house, and one of them had a gun. He jumped over the wall and ran up to the dead end, which is a ghetto near my house called Wacky Pen. It's actually part of a bigger ghetto called Grant's Pen, which in later years became very violent. In fact, we saw the guy, and it was a guy Wenty used to give money to on the road all the time. So we told him, look, man, we saw that guy, he could have shot you. And he said he wouldn't do it again. About a year or two later, the lady started shouting, thief, thief, thief. But it was different this time. She sounded really, really terrified. She was banging on the window. Oh God, thief, thief, me go dead. Ah! Wenty goes out, and my mother, Avril, is begging him, don't go, you'll be killed, geez, don't go. And she's grabbing him. I don't know where Mark and Colin were. Maybe Colin wasn't living there, maybe they were sleeping. But it's me and Avril fighting, grabbing him, trying to pull him back in the house, and he shakes us off, closes the door, goes over to the lady's house, and the lady shouting, gunman, I'm gonna kill me, God, ah, ah. And when he reaches up to her veranda, she says, Mr. B, don't come, may I beg you. It's two of them with big, big gun. And this is the first time he came back to our house. He jogged back over, and as he closed the door, I'm not lying to you, as he closed the door, about 6 men with M16 rifles rolled on the ground past Nigel and Mike's house. You know, like soldiers in a movie that were rolling against the wall and everything like military commandos. And when the lady saw them, she said, oh God, them are gonna kill me now. And the men said, one of them said, it's okay, miss. We're from the Jamaica Constabulary Force. We are here to protect you. And he said it loud, I could hear him. He had a kind of pseudo British American accent. But our neighbor, Mrs. Griffith, she was so terrified, she thought these were the gunmen coming to kill her, and she kept shouting, God, God, jailer. And then the same guy who was speaking to her so professionally said, lady, mister, we are the police, stop shout, where the gunman them there? And she stopped crying, and it turned out the guys had jumped over her wall, went over to Grant's Pen. A little later, there was a shootout, but they escaped. And the police told us they had been tracking these guys for quite a while. So that lady probably saved Wenty's life, but he didn't see it that way. He was outraged because he said, you know, those policemen, you see how respectful they were to us last night? I'm sure they weren't like that when they went to Grant's Pen. And it's like he didn't realize he could have been shot. You know, he was just, so anyway, I don't know if he had many regrets. You know, we all have regrets in life, but he told me only of 2. I'm sure he had many, many more because he was a private kind of person who didn't want to disturb you with his private business. But the 2 regrets he said he had were quite interesting in their own way. One of them, he said, was he regretted never having given a Carimac student a recommendation. And it happened one day when at the end of the school year, some student asked for a recommendation in class, and he said, okay. And that led to the 12 or 14 or 15 other students in the class also begging for a recommendation. So he kept saying, yes, yes, yes. And then he came out like this girl, and he said, no, no, no recommendation for you. But he didn't mean it in a mean way. But he said the girl looked so forlorn and distressed, he started wondering if she was going to commit suicide or something. And he was very upset that he had told her no, because in truth, he was telling her no because he didn't want to be signing all these recommendations, when in fact that girl was one of his better students. So he had this regret about disappointing that young lady. And he said he had tried to find her, but could not. Anyway, the other regret he mentioned to me was also quite fascinating from a historical point of view, and it had to do with his work. I don't know if he was working at the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, which was our publicly owned TV station for many years, or if he was still at the Jamaica Information Service, which was the government information arm. I don't know if it's still called JIS. It had changed to API. Anyway, the story was that he wanted to do a program about this guy called Howell, Percival Howell. Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with that name, but Percival Howell in later years has been identified by quite a few historians as probably the founder of Rastafari in Jamaica, even though he himself was not a dreadlocks. He was a bald head. He did not have locks like, you know, Bob Marley and so on. But Wenty had known about this person because when he first went to Jamaica, you know, they told him Rastas are dirty and nasty and blah, blah. And I think his first few stories went with that line that they were unsavory. But as he got to meet them, he realized they were human beings just like everybody else. So he wanted to interview this guy, Howell. And he went, I think he was with his favorite cameraman, which was a guy called Ken Dawson, who had also helped him film that thing about the artist Parvis thing. So Wenty said usually when they would go somewhere with a camera team and a soundman and so, they would turn on their cameras and everything before going to do the program. But this time, even though his mind told him turn on the camera, he did not turn on the camera. He went up to where Howell was, and one of Howell's lieutenants told him, you can't see him now because he's traveling. And Wenty told me he took that to mean that the guy was in deep meditation, probably doing astral travel where, you know, he went back in time or was whatever, visualizing. Anyway, before they could turn around, Howell comes out of the place and he went to said at the same time Howell came out of the building or shack or whatever it was, there was a sudden burst of thunder and lightning and flashing of lightning. And he said it was so much like a movie that to this day, he regrets not having had that camera on because it was such an important part of, you know, potential history for the Caribbean and Jamaica. And I wasn't there, but I regret it too. And I'll just say he was a pretty cool guy. He had his faults, but I won't go into those now. But thank you all for listening to me and thank you all for taking part. We really appreciate it. And it's so nice to see so many of you, especially people I know personally and my cousins and friends, and thank you very, very much. All right, Mark, back to you.
Thank you, Wayne. I think you have shown why you come last on every occasion like this. You would be an impossible act to follow. You gave us stories that probably nobody else would even dream of, and you gave us with very good sound effects as well, you know. So we really appreciate that one, Wayne. We basically have covered what we had intended to cover. However, we'd throw it out if there's anyone who has a pressing desire to maybe say a few words or add anything or maybe comment on what you have seen today. I think we could unmute the mics, Janice, to allow anyone to give their feedback or anything.
Well, good night, everyone. I'm Rosemary King, and I really have to say something. Hi, Wayne, Colin, Mark. All right, I grew up, you could say that from I was a baby, literally. I think my mother pushed me beside Avril pushing Wayne. That's how far back it went. And I was always at their house. Their house was like the other family, the go-to family. They're very close, all the birthday parties, you name it. And Avril, Uncle Wenty was always very quiet, but I always felt comfortable with him. He just had a loving, fatherly, quiet presence. And I also I'm very grateful to the family for carrying me to church when I was 3 years old. My parents weren't going to church at the time. And I know that Auntie Avril, I'm not sure whether Wenty was with her because I was only 3, but they took me to church, and it has left an indelible impression because I'm now worshiping at the same church, the same denomination that she took me to. And I'm the only family member in that denomination. So I'm really thankful to the family. They've been good support. I'm sure my mother and father would want to be on here to give they're extremely close friends of Auntie Avril and Uncle Wenty. And I'm just so, it's just a pity that it's at times like these that I am getting to interact again with Wayne, and I know Colin is on here. You know, we really have to keep closer because life is so short. Love you guys, and my condolences.
Thanks, Rose, and we miss you too. Miss Colin, miss everybody, man. Hal, Lane, Tony, Pat. Hope one day I'll meet all of you in person. Stephen, thanks for passing through. Lynn. Some people I don't really remember, but it's great to see you. Velma Pollard, I haven't seen you for such a long time, since I was a child. You were great to see you. Thank you.
So on that note, guys, thank you all for coming. We hope that by seeing the different perspectives of his life at different times and hearing different people speak about him, that we each get a better picture of the man, you know?
Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hi.
You could go ahead.
My name is Pat, and I'm Wenty's cousin.
Okay, and Pat, who I've heard so much about and never got the chance to meet. Great to see you.
Thank you. I think I've met Wayne.
Yes,
so we were cousins. Wenty was my ultra favorite cousin. When we were 8, 9, or 10, we were discussing poetry, books, literature, art. I always felt he's a couple years older than I am. And we discussed these things, and I felt I was so intellectual and sophisticated. And of course, I still love language and writing. And we also touched on humor. And Wenty was the photographer. As the families got older, he was always the one behind the camera and capturing that. I think that was inherited from his mom. His mom adored photography. But Wenty was always fun to be with. Good stories, we create stories. And so it's not a surprise to hear about his career. We lost touch for many years. I came to Montreal and I became a nurse. And then we reconnected when he moved back to Barbados because his mom, I would stay at her place when I went back. And it was always a good connection with Wenty. The books, that's another whole story. He loved books and collected books. And I don't know if he read all the books, but he certainly loved books and knowledge. And I loved him. And thank you for coming. And thank you, sons, and everybody who helped him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aunt Pat. And we have to commend all the people from Canada, the Bear family. Tremendous love shown to us from the Bear family. We could never even talk about it in full, you know? It's really too much. It's really humbling. Derek is here. He's not probably eager to speak, but man, we're so glad to see you. So thank you all for coming out, giving my father the love, giving the family the support. We really appreciate it. COVID has dampened our spirits somewhat, made it difficult for us in many ways, but at the end of the day, we tried our best. We tried to represent the man as best we could, you know.
I just want to thank you guys for setting this up. I'm really totally moved. I'm very happy
to be able to listen to all of this, and it just brings back so much time to me. My name is Velma Pollard. I've been around forever, from Avril's first day on campus, maybe. And I'm just glad that you all put this together at a time like this. You know, it gave us so much of a sense of the Wenty that we knew and the Avril that we knew, right? So thank you so much.
Thank you, Velma Pollard. Your name precedes you. To be honest, I know the name, but I don't even remember all the connotations it has, you know? It's a name I've heard from ever since. My dad really regarded the university community like a family. You know, everybody there, he really treasured his days there. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm thanking everyone for the support. And I'd especially like again to thank certain people. Annette Bear, the Bear family. Okay. Forgive me, I'm being supported in the background and it distracted me a bit. I'd like to allow Annette Bear, who is a favorite cousin of my dad, if she chooses to say a few words. I'm not sure if she really wants to. She looks surprised that I'm saying that. But that was what I was hearing, so.
Yes, given the hour, we weren't sure, but it's a brief speech. It's a few minutes. So please indulge us, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, I'm Annette Bear, Archer, for those of you who are Barbadian and maybe in my age group. Wenty and I are first cousins, but more a sibling to me, and definitely my best friend. Wenty was 2 years older than me. As I was the first child in my family, we were together often in the early years and developed a bond. He remembered things I did not. He remembered living in Barbary Hill. I didn't. He recalled that we did tap dancing classes. I didn't, and I loved dancing. Later, I remember our parents saying that when we danced, Wenty would stay in a very small area and I would be all over the place. Wenty was a quiet, agreeable child. I never saw him running about and roughhousing. He always loved to read. He was well informed at an early age and a fount of knowledge. I benefited from this. He told me about planets, stars, Captain Marvel, and Robin Hood. I remember a certain interest of his that got him into trouble. He had read how to perform magic tricks, even difficult ones, like the one where the magician has his assistant line a box, covers her with his magic cloak, cuts her in half, and emerges unscathed. On one of my many visits to Granny, or maternal grandmother, Wenty, dressed in his magic hat, performed his tricks for me, even the difficult one. The assistant was a matchbox, which he had lying on a wire frame that he could manipulate, draped in cloth. He performed the trick, and then with the magic words, abracadabra, he revealed the matchbox intact. I was spellbound. The two of us were elated with his success. We thought a lot of people would enjoy seeing this. A short time later, Wenty told me that Aunt Lean made him destroy all his magic paraphernalia and banned him doing magic. She said he would become an Obeah man. Life continued for Wenty, eating his meals very slowly and sipping cocoa, always reading a book which was open beside him on the table. He remained there engrossed long after everyone else had finished their meals and left. As he grew older, Wenty was considered a heartthrob. All of my friends thought he was so handsome. When I reported that a girl admired him, he would just laugh quietly and shyly. But he did take an interest in his appearance. The fitness guru of the day, Charles Atlas, had a program about how to transform oneself from a 90-pound weakling to a muscle man. Wenty decided to make a change. He read all of Atlas's materials and completed the program, exercising with weights and resistance bands. He built some muscles too. There's a photo of him posing, kneeling bare-chested, arms held up to display his newly developed biceps. I helped teach Wenty ballroom dancing. Our mother's youngest sister was to be married. The ceremony, a family affair only, was held at Granny's house. And Wenty would have to be able to dance. Wenty and I went to work. I showed him where to place his hands, and we started on the footwork. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, we went in a straight line and turned. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and back. Nothing fancy. You could dance anything with those basics. There was some stumbling, but we both thoroughly enjoyed the dancing and practiced a lot. Wenty was determined, and he held his own at the wedding. Those were idyllic times. As soon as he graduated from high school, Wenty went to St. Kitts to teach. And frequently, we would meet again over the years, whether in Jamaica, when our families were young, or later visiting Barbados. And it was as if we had never been separated. Wenty, low-key and smiling, absorbed in his latest passion, photography, writing, West Indian politics. His thirst for knowledge was unquenchable. Qualities I especially admired about him. He never spoke ill of anyone, and he was not envious of others' achievements. I never heard Wenty in a quarrel. I think that whenever there was a contentious issue, he listened and frustratingly said nothing. Others finally gave up. Wenty and I never quarreled, though our opinions differed in many ways. In our final conversation, when Wenty was in Barbados and on his last legs, and I in Canada, we reminisced about the early days, a return to the golden memories. I knew that he was, in all things that really mattered, a good person, a unique man, and I loved him. Farewell, my beloved cousin.
Thank you so much. Every conversation I have with you, I feel the love. That's all I can say. I feel the love. And some of the things you say really strike me. I mean, the photography, the interest in magic, strangely enough, Wayne at one period was very interested in magic. So I find it strange how some things seem to be almost in the genes, you know? Photography, all of us, Wayne, Colin, and myself, we love photography. It seems to be on both sides of the family. My mother was also into photography, which I didn't realize until not long ago. So very interesting, the reminiscent memories, and the nostalgia is killing me over here now. I don't think I can handle it much longer. I'm going to start crying if we continue this way too long. We have a little slideshow. I think we'll use that to just wrap up.
Just before that, I just want to say that I am very glad to meet Annette.
And you.
I have heard so much about you, and I know that I didn't realize that you all grew up so close, but I know he always admired you, and anything you would say, I have to tell her this. And so I must say that it is a pleasure meeting you. The thing about it is that when he became sick, my phone was out for a whole month and a half, and I was trying to get you on my cell phone, but I would just get your answering service. So I didn't get to speak to you before, but it is nice meeting some of the people here. I know I've heard about them, like I've heard about Pat, and I see a few names that I remember. And it is nice to see a face now and remember you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's an unbelievable melting pot or meeting place. I mean, it's really nice to feel the love and support. As I said, we'll probably play a short slideshow, and that's really it. Thank you so much for sharing the memories with us, and we really value your support, and we will continue to keep in touch. Thank you again.